This is Logan Blackwood, reporting for International Desk. 20% of the world's oil moves through a single stretch of water, 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. And right now, Iran controls it. Tehran has moved to restrict access through the Strait of Hormuz, and the global oil market is already starting to crack. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what Iran just did, why they did it right now, and what happens to energy prices, global shipping, and world stability if this doesn't get resolved fast. This is not a drill. This is not the first time Iran has made this move, but the context this time is different. And that difference is what makes it genuinely dangerous. Let me put this in simple terms. Think of the Strait of Hormuz like a single highway connecting an entire city to the outside world. No detours, no back roads, no alternatives. Now imagine one person has the power to put a gate across that highway, anytime they want, for any reason they choose. Every truck, every tanker, every shipment of food and fuel stopped cold. That is exactly what Iran holds in its hands right now. The world built its entire energy system around this one road, and Tehran has known that for a very long time. Here is what happened. Tensions between Iran and the United States have been building for months. Sanctions have tightened. Naval confrontations in the Persian Gulf have increased, and Iran's government, facing mounting internal pressure and deepening external isolation, needed a move that would force the world to pay attention. So they played their biggest card. Iranian military vessels and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, began positioning assets along the strait. Iranian officials issued statements warning foreign powers to stay out of what they called Iran's sphere of security. And simultaneously, Iranian state media confirmed that new restrictions on commercial vessel passage were being evaluated and enforced. The message could not have been clearer. Cross us, and the oil stops flowing. The market reacted instantly. Within hours of the announcement, Brent crude futures jumped over 8%. Shipping insurance rates for vessels transiting the Gulf spiked. Several major tanker operators announced they were rerouting away from the strait entirely. That means longer journeys, more fuel burned, slower deliveries, and higher prices at every point down the chain. But here is where it gets more serious. This is not just another Iran threat. The global energy market is already under stress, and it has very little room to absorb a shock like this. OPEC plus production cuts are still in effect. Russian oil remains under heavy sanctions. Post-pandemic demand never softened the way analysts hoped. The buffer the world used to rely on? It is thinner than it has been in years. In the past, when Iran made this kind of move, Saudi Arabia and the UAE could step in and open spare capacity. Strategic reserves in the US and Europe could buy time. Those options still exist, but they are weaker now. And the geopolitical backing behind Iran has shifted too. China has deepened its economic ties with Tehran. Russia and Iran have been coordinating on multiple fronts. The diplomatic tools the West once used to bring Iran back from the edge, they are not as sharp as they used to be. This is not just an oil story. It is a test of how much leverage the West still holds. Let's look at the hard evidence. Here are the facts on the ground. The Strait of Hormuz handles between 17 and 21 million barrels of oil every single day. That is roughly 1/5 of global oil consumption moving through a channel less than 40 kilometers wide. The U.S. Energy Information Administration has called it the world's most critical oil choke point, and there is no pipeline system that can fully replace it. The alternatives, Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline, the UAE's Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, can carry only a fraction of that volume, nowhere near enough to compensate for a full closure. Iran has played this card before, and it worked. In 2019, after the U.S. reimposed sweeping sanctions following the withdrawal from the nuclear deal, Iran seized foreign tankers, attacked ships with limpet mines, and shot down a U.S. surveillance drone over the strait. Oil prices surged. The world scrambled. And despite the full weight of U.S. military presence in the region, including the Fifth Fleet based in Bahrain, Iran was never fully stopped. The threats created leverage, and leverage eventually creates concessions. And the timing of this move is not accidental. Iran chose this moment carefully. U.S. military assets in the region are stretched. Washington's attention is split across multiple theaters: Europe, East Asia, the Pacific. And domestically, there is limited political appetite for another confrontation in the Middle East. Iran's leadership is not reckless. They calculate. And right now, their calculation is that the cost of pushing back against them is higher than the world is prepared to pay. But here is where it gets worse. It is not just oil. The Strait of Hormuz is also a critical corridor for liquefied natural gas, LNG. Qatar, one of the world's largest LNG exporters, routes a significant portion of its shipments through this channel. And Europe, which has been scrambling to replace Russian gas ever since the war in Ukraine, now depends on Qatari LNG more than ever before. If Hormuz closes, or even if the threat of closure persists long enough, European energy security takes another serious blow. Prices rise, winter becomes a political emergency, and governments that were just beginning to stabilize their energy budgets find themselves back in crisis mode. But wait, it goes even deeper than that. India imports over 80% of its oil. A large portion of it comes from Gulf producers. A disruption in Hormuz does not just shake Western economies, it hammers the developing world. Countries already dealing with food inflation, weak currencies, and fragile supply chains, they feel this immediately and intensely. The pain does not stay in the headlines. It shows up in grocery stores, at fuel pumps, in the cost of keeping the lights on. And here's the part most people are missing entirely. Iran does not need to fully close the strait to win this. They just need to make it feel unsafe. Every tanker captain who decides to reroute, every insurance company that raises its rates, every shipping firm that delays a delivery. That is Iran winning, without firing a single shot. The threat alone does the work. Let's talk about what this means for the rest of the world. Oil markets are already pricing in a risk premium. If this situation escalates further, a confrontation, a seized vessel, a skirmish near the strait, analysts are warning of oil prices returning to triple digits. That feeds directly into global inflation. Central banks that have spent years carefully managing interest rates would face entirely new pressure. Economic recoveries in multiple regions could stall or reverse. For the United States, the options are all uncomfortable. A military response risks a broader escalation nobody wants. Diplomatic engagement hands Iran a reward for applying pressure. And doing nothing sends a signal of weakness to every adversary watching from Beijing and Moscow. There is no clean choice here. For Saudi Arabia and the UAE, it is a tightrope. Higher oil prices benefit their economies, up to a point. But regional instability threatens everything they have been building. Vision 2030, the tourism push, the financial diversification. They want the revenue without the war on their doorstep. For China, it is complicated. Beijing is Iran's largest oil customer. A prolonged closure hurts China too. But China may calculate that the damage it does to Western economies and the pressure it places on Washington is worth the short-term cost. Expect Beijing to position itself as the essential mediator. That is leverage of an entirely different kind. And for the rest of the world, the smaller economies across Asia, Africa, and Latin America that have no seat at this table, they absorb the consequences without any ability to shape the outcome. That powerlessness is precisely why crises like this breed lasting resentment toward the global order. If this is connecting dots you haven't seen anywhere else, subscribe now. We cover the stories that shape the world before the mainstream catches up. Hit the bell, stay informed, because what happens in Hormuz does not stay in Hormuz. Here's the bottom line. Iran has not fully closed the strait, not yet, but they have done something almost as powerful. They have reminded the world that they can. Every hour this remains unresolved, pressure builds on oil markets, on diplomatic backchannels, on military planners in Washington, Riyadh, and Beijing. The West will push for de-escalation. Iran will push for concessions. The world will hold its breath. And the question is not whether a deal eventually gets made. The question is what Iran extracts in return for standing down. Sanctions relief, nuclear negotiations, recognition of their regional influence. Whatever it is, it will be significant. Because Iran did not play this card for nothing. They played it because they believe right now that they are holding the stronger hand. History will tell us whether they were right. But one thing is already clear. The era of treating the Strait of Hormuz as a stable, predictable corridor, that era may be ending. And this might only be the beginning. This is Logan Blackwood for International Desk. Stay sharp.